Synthesis is a critical part of teaching and learning within the framework for effective instruction. It is often the piece that teachers lose track of in the rush of creating strong launches and strong investigations. With short periods, it is often the piece that gets left out, but it is the critical moment for students to begin to consolidate what they've done over the course of a day. But without a moment when you actually stop and you think about what one has been learning and try and name it or articulate it in some sort of simple way, it is easy for all of the pieces that are so clear to the teacher when they lay out the lesson to never become clear to the student.
The synthesis is about putting the ideas together, but it's not just the what, it's how you did it. And that's when we talk about this magic word, metacognition, which is really just thinking about your thinking. But there's been some incredible studies done throughout the United States where we've seen when you get students to journal, think aloud, when you get students to write about their actual skill that helped them to understand something. So for example, we might be asking students to determine importance in a character. They're reading a story about a character and we want them to determine the important traits they have. And they've never read like that before. So then they notice, God, I really started to understand this character in a way I never understood it before. Well, that's great, but if you don't understand why you did that, it's like it might as well just go right out of your head. And that's where the piece about synthesis, it's not just the what, it's how you did it.
My goal today was to introduce the concept of symbolism to my students. And as far as the wrap-up and synthesis, after classwork, we were sharing out and verbalizing the way we were connecting symbols to their meaning, cultural meaning and personal meaning as well. Sometimes I ask them also, how did you arrive at this conclusion? You know, why do you think the way you're thinking? And sometimes it totally baffles them, and sometimes they give answers that, while they're answering, they realize much more than they have before.
Today in Natalia's class, we were talking about symbol and symbolism, and we read this poem by Mos Def, which is really a rap song. And we were just discussing the symbols and how a symbol can symbolize something to many different people. We have like in each class we have a small time for like a reflection, and which has been going on this year more than last year. And it's just to like reflect on what you learned and to see if you did learn something or if you didn't, and if you have a problem with anything that happened. And if you do, then you can also ask the teacher. If you have a problem or anything, you can also write it down in your reflection of the day, and which I think is a really great idea that I really like.
This whole idea of being very strategic about not only teaching kids the skill, but having kids talk about the skill and reflect on how this skill drew them into, whether it's the story or the content, I find is very important. And that I feel in many ways is transforming the way our kids get better at learning how to learn.
Where did your mind go when you read that quote? Where did your mind go?
Some students know what a good reader looks like, but they don't know how to make themselves good readers. So when they have to think about why something is working, then they can isolate which strategies they have to use in order to get that way.
Metacognition definitely helps, because for you to really understand what's really going on, the process, if you will, then you've got to be thinking about your own thinking.
Where you're really going to notice it is as I see students reading and writing improve, because that's the connection. Some of the students who talk about it better can talk about what process they had, those are the students who tend to do better. Now, how do I notice it in a teacher? It's a very conscious thing. Teachers are asking students to journal about these things. Teachers are constantly asking the how and the why questions, not just the what questions. And then having students write about that, and so that they become conscious of their own thinking processes. It's really, in some ways, that simple and that difficult.
If I go into Joa's class, I'm almost certain I'm going to see that the kids are going to be using the literacy strategy words. I'm using inferencing to do this. I'm visualizing. I'm, analyzing. So they're very aware of what they're doing because it's part of the lesson. It's built into the lesson that this skill is explicitly what we're working on today.
When we were talking about our warm-up, when we were talking about which strategy to use and when, right? What do we say? When do we use inferring or creating an image or predicting? When should we do it?
If we break down something that's familiar, then when we use a reading passage or strategy, then they can go through the same process to break down the material. So if I want them to paraphrase something, we talk about what would you change in this to make it your own? Just as if they were telling a story for a movie. They don't rewrite the whole movie, they just pick highlights. And that's a skill, that's determining what's important. What do you want to include? What things do you leave out? So we just talk about the process. How did you get to this answer? So at the end, we don't just do a share out. What did you do to get to that answer?
Right.
And they have to explain that because the answer is not valid unless you can explain it.
So just quick anecdote again, metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking, that's a trained skill. People have heard this before from me, some of you. In Sweden, many years ago, they had all the students play chess an hour before class started. Every student. Didn't change anything about their teaching. But they had them talk about their chess moves and why they made the moves they did and what other ways could they look at. And you already know the ending of this story, which is kids' scores rose because there's a way of thinking about thinking that's important.
If they can understand how they attacked one investigation or a series of investigations over a month or a unit or a course, the assumption is that that is at a certain point transferable and they can use it in other academic contexts or even in other areas of life, the professional world, etc.
Too often, synthesis is about summary, and that's a very different question. Summarizing is just retelling the information. Synthesizing is putting it together, showing how it can apply to something else, and how something new has come out of it. It's that aha moment.